The battle at Tiberius IV. The sun blazed mercilessly over the endless dunes of Tiberius IV, a desert planet scarred by years of war. The air shimmered with heat and dust, and the distant rumble of heavy machinery echoed across the barren landscape. Amidst the swirling sandstorms and jagged rock formations, the once proud human defense lines were crumbling. General Evie Harper stood atop a ridge, her eyes scanning the horizon with a sharp, tactical precision born from years of battle. Her uniform was smeared with dirt and blood, but her posture remained unyielding. She was a warrior forged in fire, unbroken and relentless. Around her, exhausted soldiers readied themselves for another wave of attacks. Morale was fragile, but Evie's presence kept them anchored. "Hold the line," she barked, voice clear and commanding despite the chaos. "They think we'll break, but they don't know who we are." Her men grunted in response, rallying behind her fiery determination. The Galactic Empire's forces had landed 3 days prior, bringing with them overwhelming firepower, drones, energy cannons, and legions of elite shock troops. Humanity's defenses, stretched thin and under-equipped, were being ground down relentlessly. Evie had expected this. She knew the Empire's arrogance well, overconfident in their advanced technology, dismissive of human tenacity. But she also knew they underestimated one critical thing. Humans never surrendered. From the ridge, Evie spotted the enemy's advance. Rows of heavily armored troops marched forward, their exoskeleton suits gleaming under the harsh sun, accompanied by towering mech walkers stomping through the sand like unstoppable beasts. The Imperial Standard, a black and crimson banner with the emblem of a clenched fist, fluttered in the wind, a symbol of oppression. "Prepare the plasma turrets," she ordered. "Target the mech walkers first. We'll take down their legs, then finish them off with concentrated fire." Her communications officer nodded and relayed the commands. Around them, artillery blazed, sending streaks of blue and red light across the battlefield. Explosions tore through the sand, throwing up clouds of dust. Despite the onslaught, Evie's troops fought with ferocity. They fired, charged, and held their ground as best they could. But the Empire's numbers were overwhelming. The desert was soon littered with the fallen, soldiers from both sides, broken machines, and shattered hopes. Suddenly, a sharp alert rang in Evie's earpiece. "General, sensors detect an incoming squad, fast-moving. They're heading your way." Evie's heart tightened. "Show me." On the holo screen, a squad of elite shock troops appeared, black-clad, equipped with stealth gear and advanced weaponry. They were infamous for surgical strikes, and their target was clear: Evie herself. "They're coming for me," she said grimly. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Eric, looked uneasy. "We can't pull you back, General. We have to hold the line. If I fall," Evie interrupted, "the fight falls with me." "No, I'll deal with this." She grabbed her pulse rifle and activated the stealth cloak embedded in her armor. With a final look to her men, she slipped down the ridge, vanishing from sight. The sand was hot beneath her boots as she moved swiftly toward the approaching threat. The elite squad moved with deadly precision, but Evie was faster and more experienced. She dodged energy blasts, countered with quick bursts of fire, and wove through the terrain like a shadow. But the squad had numbers, and eventually one caught her off guard. A plasma lance seared through her side, and she collapsed onto the sand, pain erupting in a white-hot blaze. Her vision blurred as blood seeped through her armor. General Varnak, the Imperial commander, stood over her, eyes cold and merciless. "You fought well, human," he said, voice laced with disdain. "But this is where your rebellion ends." With a nod, his troops surrounded her fallen form. They took no chances. Evie was a symbol of human resistance, and killing her here would demoralize the remaining forces. They left her body bleeding in the sand, certain she would die quickly, and retreated, their confidence bolstered. The human soldiers who witnessed this felt a chilling silence. Their leader, wounded, defeated, left for dead. The word spread fast. Evie Harper was gone. As the sun dipped low behind the horizon, the battlefield grew quiet but heavy with despair. The remaining soldiers gathered in small groups, tending to the wounded, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. Lieutenant Eric stared down at the spot where Evie had fallen, rage and helplessness battling within him. "She can't be dead," he whispered. "She won't be." But even he wasn't sure if hope still lived in the burning sands of Tiberius IV. The return. The stars above Tiberius IV were indifferent to the fate of the humans below. To the Empire, the desert planet was just another conquest, another extinguished ember in the galaxy's fire. But for the broken remnants of humanity's resistance, Tiberius IV was all that stood between them and oblivion. As the sun sank completely behind the dunes, the battlefield was left in silence. General Evie Harper's body, once thought to be lifeless and abandoned in the sand, began to stir. Her pulse, once faint and irregular, regained strength, an almost imperceptible thrum, but enough to awaken the dormant spark inside her. Her eyes flickered open, dark and intense, filled with the raw determination of someone who had faced death and refused to accept it. Pain shot through her side, where the plasma lance had torn through her armor, but it was no longer debilitating. Something inside her had shifted. Evie's breath was ragged at first, but slowly the pain subsided. Her body, bruised and broken, began to heal faster than it should. The wound in her side closed, her broken ribs mended, and the blood that had once soaked into the desert sand was absorbed back in her veins, as though time itself had reversed. Her strength returned, and with it, a terrible clarity of purpose. Evie stood, the desert winds brushing against her as she took a slow, deliberate step forward. There was no fear. There was no hesitation. The battlefield was empty, save for the wreckage of the war machines that had once dominated the landscape. The human soldiers, her soldiers, had been left to mourn her loss. But she was not lost. She reached out, a subtle gesture, and her voice, though not spoken, resonated through the ether. "Rise." It was a word, but not one bound by any language. It was a command sent through an ancient frequency, something deep in her blood, something forgotten. As if the very stars had heard her call, the earth beneath her feet trembled. The sand, which had once swallowed her, now seemed to bow at her feet. Far across the galaxy, across millions of light years, something responded. On the far edge of the galaxy, hidden in the deepest corners of forgotten space, a massive, dormant fleet began to stir. Ancient ships, warriors of a long-forgotten era of humanity, awakened. From hidden vaults on distant moons, war machines that had been buried for millennia began to rattle to life, their engines humming with untapped power. And from the surface of an undiscovered world, a long-sealed crypt unlocked, releasing soldiers who had waited for a leader to call them home. In every dark corner of space, humans who had been scattered, exiled, or lost began to hear the whisper of Evie's voice, echoing across time and space. For the future, for our people. Evie stood alone in the stillness of the battlefield, her body glowing with a faint, radiant energy. The power inside her was ancient, a force inherited from forgotten time. Humanity's legacy of resilience and strength. The very same strength that had allowed her to survive the unthinkable. And now, it would give her the power to rise again. As the minutes ticked by, a humming sound filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. From the distance, Evie saw it. Ships, vast and silent, descending from the sky. First, one, then another, until the entire horizon was filled with the dark shapes of ancient warships, their hulls gleaming in the fading light. These were not imperial ships, nor were they any modern human creations. They were relics, constructed by a lost humanity, vessels that had once conquered the stars in ways the Empire could not comprehend. At the center of the descending fleet was a massive flagship, its size dwarfing everything around it. It hovered just above the desert, and Evie could see the silhouettes of figures moving across its enormous surface. As the ships landed, they released dozens of drop pods, each one carrying a different type of soldier: armored warriors, elite tacticians, engineers with the skill to command entire fleets, and others whose presence could only be described as legendary. A single figure descended from one of the drop pods, his face obscured by a helmet, but his stance unmistakable. He was one of the lost, humans who had fought beside the ancestors of Evie's people, warriors whose names had been erased from history. They had been waiting for a leader to awaken their cause. And now, that leader had arrived. The figure knelt before Evie, his voice a quiet, respectful murmur. "General Harper, your call has been answered. The lost have returned." Evie's lips curled into a determined smile. "We are not lost. We were only waiting." She turned her gaze to the horizon, where more ships were arriving. Her army, her real army, was back. The war was not over. It had only just begun. Back at the human encampment, Lieutenant Eric paced in frustration, his mind racing. The battle had been lost, and his general, was gone. He could feel the weight of the defeat pressing down on him. And then it happened. A signal came through, faint but undeniable, a transmission from an unknown source. Eric's hands trembled as he brought up the holographic display. The message was brief, but its meaning was clear. "We have returned." Evie was no longer just a general. She was the spark that would ignite the fury of humanity's forgotten legacy, the flame that would burn the Empire to the ground. Her army had returned, and now it was time to make the galaxy remember what humanity was capable of. The army rises. The desert night of Tiberius IV was alive with quiet energy as ancient warships hummed softly on the horizon. Their arrival was like a promise made long ago, one that humanity was finally ready to keep. General Evie Harper stood tall amidst the sand, her gaze unwavering. The weight of history rested on her shoulders, but she embraced it with fierce determination. Her newly summoned army was no ordinary force. These were the lost legions, descendants of the original human settlers who had been scattered across the galaxy centuries ago, hidden away in remote colonies where the Empire's reach had not yet extended. They were survivors, warriors, and scholars who had preserved technology and battle doctrines far beyond current human knowledge. Evie felt their presence within her, a collective strength that pulsed like a living organism, binding the soldiers, machines, and warships into a unified whole. She raised her hand, and through a secure comm channel, her voice echoed with authority. "Prepare for deployment. We move at dawn." In a makeshift command center carved into a rocky outcrop, Lieutenant Eric gathered the remaining human soldiers who had survived the initial assault. His eyes widened when the ancient fleet appeared on their sensors. Skepticism gave way to hope as they received Evie's orders. "What is this? Who are these people?" one soldier asked. "They are our salvation," Eric answered, his voice steady but charged with excitement. "The lost legions, our kin from the forgotten colonies. They have answered General Harper's call." The human troops scrambled to ready themselves. Evie's return had injected new life into their broken ranks, transforming despair into determination. The soldiers, once broken and leaderless, now felt the surge of an unstoppable force behind them. As the first light of dawn crept over the dunes, the lost legions began to mobilize. Armored infantry marched in perfect formation, their suits embedded with adaptive shielding and pulse weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Beside them, towering war machines rumbled to life, their heavy steps shaking the ground. Above, sleek fighters and heavy bombers, long hidden from Imperial eyes, ascended into the sky. Evie's flagship, the Resurgence, led the fleet, its hull engraved with ancient symbols of human resilience. She stood on the bridge, her mind focused on the coming battle. "Our target is Caldera," Evie said, speaking to her commanders. "The Imperial base their control supply lines across this sector. If we break their grip, the Empire's hold on this region will crumble." The commanders nodded in agreement. The plan was audacious but necessary. strike deep and hard to cripple the enemy's backbone. The jump to Caldera was swift. Evie's fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the planet, catching the Empire off guard. Sensors lit up with alerts as the ancient human fleet, previously thought extinct, decloaked en masse. General Varnak, still seething from his failure to kill Evie, stared at the incoming forces from his command tower. "Impossible," he muttered. They were supposed to be broken. Imperial officers scrambled to mobilize defenses, but the lost legions were relentless. Evie's forces struck with precision. The infantry breached perimeter defenses while the war machines tore through armored columns. The skies were filled with bursts of plasma and the roar of engines as fighters dogfought with Imperial crafts. Evie personally led a squad into the heart of the base, her tactical genius evident in every move. She anticipated Imperial counterattacks, adapting on the fly and using guerrilla tactics learned from centuries of hidden warfare. During the assault, Evie's second-in-command, Lieutenant Eric, fought alongside her. "General, reinforcements are arriving. The Empire is sending their elite shock troops." Evie's eyes narrowed. "Good. Let them come. We'll show them what humanity's legacy really means." As the Imperial elite charged, they were met with fierce resistance from Evie's troops and war machines. The battle was brutal and fast-paced, but the Lost Legion's superior technology and tactics gave them the edge. Hours later, as the dust settled, the Imperial base lay in ruins. Evie's forces had taken control, capturing critical supply depots and communication arrays. The victory was decisive, a message sent across the galaxy. Evie addressed her troops through the comms network, her voice carrying strength and resolve. "Today, we showed the Empire that humanity will not be crushed. We are more than survivors. We are conquerors of our destiny. This is only the beginning." Across the sectors, scattered human resistance groups intercepted her message. Hope ignited in hearts long beaten down. The war was far from over, but the tide had shifted. Back on Tiberius IV, Evie and her commanders reviewed intelligence. The Empire was regrouping, sending faster and deadlier forces to stop them. General Varnak's fury was matched only by his desperation. Evie knew the fight ahead would test every ounce of her strength and the resilience of her newfound army. But with the Lost Legions united under her command, she was ready. "We move forward," she declared. "The Empire believes they have won. They are wrong. Humanity rises." The desert winds swept over the battlefield, carrying with them the echoes of a rebirth. A human army forged in secrecy and resolve, ready to challenge the very empire that had left their general bleeding in the sand. The reckoning. The victory at Caldera had sent shockwaves through the Galactic Empire. Commanders whispered in fear about the resurrection of the Lost Legions and the return of General Evelyn Harper, the woman they had left bleeding in the sand, now the spearhead of humanity's resurgence. Evie stood on the bridge of the resurgence, her eyes sharp as the stars streaked by outside the viewport. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Intelligence reports streamed in. Imperial fleets were mobilizing in force, determined to crush the rebellion before it could spread. Beside her, Lieutenant Eric reviewed tactical data. "They're sending everything they have. Heavy cruisers, reinforcements from the core systems. It's an armada the likes of which we've never faced." Evie's jaw tightened. "Good. Let them come. We've already proven they underestimate us. We'll be ready." Back on Tiberius IV, the human forces regrouped, their numbers swelling as scattered resistance cells joined the call. The desert that had once witnessed their defeat now echoed with renewed purpose and unity. In a makeshift war room, Evie addressed her commanders, their faces illuminated by flickering holograms displaying Imperial fleet movements and planetary defenses. "Our strength lies not just in numbers, but in tactics and resolve," she said firmly. "The Empire's arrogance will be their downfall. They believe their technology makes them invincible. They forget humans adapt. We fight not just with weapons, but with heart." Eric nodded. "We can strike their supply lines, disrupt communications, cut their reinforcements off before they reach us." Evie smiled, a fierce glint in her eyes. Exactly. We will be the storm that breaks their chains. The next weeks were a whirlwind of battle and strategy. Evie's forces launched swift raids against Imperial convoys, crippling supply routes and reclaiming lost planets. The Lost Legion's advanced tech gave them an edge: adaptive shields that could withstand plasma blasts, stealth drones that infiltrated enemy strongholds, and war machines that moved with eerie precision. But the Empire was relentless. General Varnak, furious and humiliated, personally led a counteroffensive. His forces were brutal and massive, pushing humanity's limits. During a fierce battle above the mining world of Epsilon Prime, Evie piloted a fighter squadron, weaving through enemy fire with lethal grace. Explosions rocked the void as fighters collided and the stars blurred in a deadly dance. "Keep formation," she commanded. "Target their command ship." The squadron unleashed a devastating salvo, crippling the heart of the Imperial fleet. As the flagship exploded, Imperial forces faltered, buying precious time for Evie's ground troops to secure the planet. Despite victories, the cost was high. Human casualties mounted, and Evie felt the burden of leadership more keenly than ever. Each loss was a wound on her soul, a reminder of the stakes. One night, beneath the twin moons of Tiberius IV, she stood alone watching the stars. Eric approached quietly. "General, the soldiers talk about you. They say you're more than a leader. You're a symbol of hope." Evie looked up, a rare softness in her eyes. "Hope is fragile, but it's all we have." Eric hesitated. "They'll follow you anywhere." A faint smile broke her stern facade. "Then I'll make sure they never have to follow me in defeat." The turning point came during the siege of Nova Centauri, a massive Imperial stronghold vital to their control of the sector. Evie's forces were outnumbered and outgunned, but she had a plan. "We hit them where they least expect," she told her commanders. "A coordinated strike. Land forces inside while the fleet distract from orbit. It will be brutal, but it will work." The battle was fierce, each moment stretching into eternity. Evie led the ground assault, moving through ruined corridors and blasted streets with fierce determination. Her troops fought like cornered lions, striking with ferocity and precision. Imperial forces tried to rally, but the Lost Legion's superior tactics and technology broke their lines. Evie confronted General Varnak in the command tower, their clash echoing the fury of the war. "You should have finished me when you had the chance," Evie said, breathing heavily. Varnak sneered, drawing his energy blade. "I will end you now." Their duel was brutal and close. Sparks flew as blade met blade, neither willing to yield. But Evie's strength was not just physical. It was the unbreakable will of humanity. With a final, desperate strike, she disarmed Varnak and forced him to surrender. As the stronghold fell, the message was clear: humanity was rising from the ashes. The Empire's grip loosened, planets liberated one by one, resistance swelling everywhere. Evie addressed the galaxy through intercepted broadcasts, her voice carrying the power of a new dawn. "We are the future. We are the unyielding spirit of humanity. The Empire left me bleeding in the sand, but I returned with an army, and we will not stop until freedom reigns." In the quiet moments after the storm, Evie allowed herself a brief breath. The battle had tested her body and soul, but she was ready for what came next. The galaxy would remember the name Harper, not as a fallen general, but as the beacon of humanity's resurgence. The war was far from over, but now the Empire knew one truth: humanity does not stay.